I was spending a peaceful week in a remote cabin deep in the Cascades of Washington. It was winter, but the snowfall was still light, and the isolation of the forest made for a quiet, relaxing getaway. For the first 3 days, everything was perfect. The calm, the fresh air, and the solitude were exactly what I needed. But on the 4th day, something happened that would change everything. That afternoon, there was an unexpected knock at the door. It startled me, as I had no neighbors nearby and the cabin was far from any main roads. I walked over and opened the door, unsure of who I would find. Standing there was a man bundled up in a thick winter jacket and a black wool hat. His face was pale, his cheeks red from the cold, and snow clung to his clothes. He had clearly been outside for a long time. "How can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man smiled in a friendly way and explained that he was lost, asking for directions back to town. This immediately confused me. The nearest town was at least an hour's drive away. If he had no car, how did he end up all the way out here? And if he did have a car, why would he be walking in the snow? Still, I figured it wasn't my business. I simply told him to take a left and follow the road back to the main highway. He nodded, smiling, but then just stood there in silence. The pause was long and uncomfortable. Neither of us spoke. Something about the way he lingered made my skin crawl. Finally, I muttered a quick goodbye and shut the door. I heard his boots crunch on the snow as he walked off, and I tried to shake off the eerie feeling. Hours passed, and by evening, the snowfall had picked up. I started to worry about how my car would handle the snow-covered dirt roads, so I decided to check outside. I pulled back the curtains near the back door, and what I saw made my stomach drop. There were footprints in the snow circling around the cabin. A deep unease settled in. Had the man from earlier wandered around the back before knocking? Was he checking if the cabin was empty? And if he had left, why were there no tracks leading away? The thought made my skin prickle with fear. It was already dark outside, and the wind had picked up, making it impossible to see much. I quickly locked all the doors, shut the curtains, and turned off the lights. I told myself I was just overthinking it, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. I went to my bedroom and tried to distract myself by watching something on my laptop. Slowly, the steady snowfall and the warmth of the blankets made me sleepy. I shut my laptop and was about to fall asleep. Then came the knock. I jolted upright, my heart pounding. The knock came again, firm but not aggressive. Then a voice. "Hey, it's me again. I'm still lost. It's really cold out here. Can you help me?" It was the same man, the one who had been at my door earlier. But why was he still here? That was hours ago. Had he been wandering in the woods this whole time? Or worse, had he never left? I crept out of bed, slowly moving toward the living room. The cabin was pitch black, but I didn't dare turn on a light. My hands were shaking as I reached the window. Careful not to be seen, I peeked outside. The footprints in the snow still led up to the porch, but there were none leading away. He was still here. A cold wave of fear washed over me. I grabbed my phone and immediately called 911. The dispatcher told me officers were on their way and would arrive in about 5 minutes. I locked myself in my bedroom and waited, every second stretching into eternity. For a long time, there was nothing. No more knocking, no sounds, just the wind howling outside. Then thud. Something heavy slammed against the cabin. My breath hitched. The silence that followed was even worse. What the hell was he doing? My mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed through the windows. Relief flooded through me. I ran to the front door, ready to greet the officers, but before I could open it, one of them shouted, "Stay inside." Then another loud thud. A commotion broke out outside. I pressed my ear to the door, heart racing. The officers were shouting, their voices urgent. Then the truth hit me like a brick. The man had never left. He had climbed onto the roof. He had been up there waiting, possibly for hours. What was he planning? Was he waiting for me to fall asleep? Was he planning to break in through a window or sneak in when I opened the door? I didn't even want to imagine what could have happened if I hadn't called the police. The officers got him down and arrested him for trespassing. But other than that, he refused to admit to anything. He gave no explanation for why he was lurking around my cabin all day or why he was on the roof. To this day, I don't know what his real intentions were, but I'm certain of one thing. Whatever he was planning, it wasn't good. Story number 2. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour ice cream shop. It wasn't the worst job, quiet, easy, and mostly empty after midnight. The occasional late-night customer would stop by, but for the most part, I was alone. At first, I enjoyed the peacefulness of it. That was until the night I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. Our shop was located in a strip mall, with most of the other businesses closing by 10 p.m. The unit next to ours had been abandoned for years. It was completely empty. No lights, no signs, just a dark, dusty space with a locked door. At around 2 a.m., I was wiping down the counters when I heard a noise. At first I thought it was coming from outside, maybe just the wind, but then I heard it again, a faint shuffling sound. I turned toward the large window facing the abandoned shop. My stomach twisted. The lights inside the abandoned unit were on. That didn't make sense. The place had been empty for as long as I'd worked there. I never saw anyone enter or leave, and there was no reason for the lights to be on now, especially at 2 a.m. I stepped closer to the window, peering inside. The space was still mostly empty, but there were a few things that hadn't been there before. Some folding chairs, a table, and what looked like a large black duffel bag sitting on the floor. The weirdest part? The back door was slightly open, just enough for a sliver of darkness to show. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to call someone, but before I could decide, something moved. A shadow shifted near the back of the unit. A figure, barely visible in the dim light, stepped forward just enough for me to see the shape of a man. Then, just as quickly as I had noticed him, he turned off the lights. I was staring into total darkness again. The men who were looking for me. I forced myself to shake it off. Maybe it was just some workers checking out the space, or maybe I was imagining things. Either way, I didn't want to get involved. I went back to work, keeping my eyes down and trying to focus on something, anything other than the eerie silence coming from next door. About 30 minutes later, a car pulled into the parking lot. 2 men got out. They didn't come straight to the shop. Instead, they stood outside looking around like they were searching for something or someone. Then one of them pointed toward the ice cream shop. I immediately felt a rush of panic. I ducked behind the counter, my heart racing. What were they doing? Were they coming in? Did they see me watching them earlier? Sure enough, the bell on the door jingled. I slowly stood up, forcing myself to act normal. "Welcome. Can I help you?" I said, my voice more nervous than I wanted it to be. The taller man stepped forward. He was dressed in dark clothing, his hood up. "You been here all night?" he asked casually. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, just me." He nodded, glancing toward the abandoned unit. "See anyone next door?" I hesitated. Something told me I shouldn't answer. "No, it's been empty all night." The 2 men exchanged a look. Then, without another word, they turned and walked out. They didn't buy anything. They didn't say goodbye. They just left. I watched them from the window as they got back in their car, but they didn't drive away. They just sat there. For the next 10 minutes, the car remained parked, the engine running, headlights off. I pretended to clean the counter, watching them from the corner of my eye. Were they waiting for someone? Waiting for me to leave? Finally, after what felt like forever, they pulled out of the lot and disappeared into the night. What were they hiding? I never saw those men again. And after that night, I never saw lights in the abandoned unit either. It was like whatever was happening there had suddenly stopped. But the strangest part? A few days later, the owner of the strip mall came by to do some maintenance. I casually asked him about the empty unit next door, if there were new tenants or construction going on. He looked confused. No one's rented that place in years. The power's been shut off since the last business left. I felt a chill run down my spine. The power was off. So, how were the lights on that night? Story number 3. Living alone in my old apartment was supposed to be a step toward independence. The place wasn't much, but it was affordable. The creaky floors and thin walls were things I got used to over time. But nothing prepared me for the night when those creaks turned into something far more sinister. I'd just gotten home from work, exhausted, but relieved to have gotten off 2 hours early. I reheated some leftovers, settled on the couch, and let the soft glow of the TV lull me into relaxation. The apartment was dimly lit, just the way I liked it when winding down. After barely an hour, my fatigue got the best of me. I turned off the TV, dragged myself into the bedroom, and fell asleep within minutes. A few hours later, I was startled awake by a creaking sound. Living in an old building, I'd grown accustomed to the random noises. The building settling, wind rattling the windows. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a groan of wood or a gust shaking the walls. This sound was steady, rhythmic, like someone slowly making their way across the floor. I sat up, my heart picking up speed. The creaking continued, then paused, then resumed. It seemed to move through the apartment, starting near the balcony and drifting toward the living room. I slipped out of bed, careful to keep my footsteps silent, and crept toward the bedroom door. Opening it just a crack, I peeked into the hallway. The sound was coming from the left, toward the living room. I strained my eyes in the darkness, and then I saw it. A figure, moving steadily across the hallway. My breath caught in my throat. The person didn't look my way, just kept walking, seemingly unaware I was even there. They disappeared into the living room, but the sounds didn't stop. I could hear the faint rustle of cabinets opening and closing, as if they were searching for something. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, to hide, to do anything but stay frozen in place. I carefully backed into my room and grabbed my phone, hands shaking as I typed a text to 911. Calling seemed too risky. I didn't want the intruder to hear me. Minutes crawled by, each one filled with the unbearable tension of waiting. I could still hear the stranger, their slow movements, then the unmistakable creak of the couch springs. They were sitting in my living room. Were they waiting for me? Was this some twisted game, or was I just unlucky enough to have a random intruder? I got a text back. The officers were in the building and on their way up. I gathered my courage, knowing help was just outside. I sprinted down the hallway, unlocked the door, and let the police in. They rushed past me, tackling the man as he tried to rise from the couch. He looked disoriented, almost like he hadn't expected anyone to be home. The officers dragged him out, and I finally took a deep breath. Apparently, the man had climbed up the side of the building to reach my second-story balcony. The sliding door didn't have a proper lock, something I hadn't worried about before. He claimed he was just trying to rob the place, but he didn't have a bag or anything to carry stolen goods. And why sit on my couch and just wait? The thought that chilled me the most was whether my unexpected early arrival threw off his plans. Maybe he expected me to be out longer, and when I came home early, he decided to wait it out. I'll never really know. But I do know that ever since that night, I double-check every lock and listen closely to every creak and groan of my old apartment. Thanks for listening. Goodbye, and have a restful sleep.